Hello and welcome to Sound Advice Live, especially if it's your second helping of AV chat today. I'm Angela Lamont, and as always, I'm joined by a fantastic team of independent specialist AV experts to put some new kit through its paces, answer your questions, and give honest opinions, because we're not paid for reviews here, so we can say what we like and pick out only the best stuff to bring to you. In the chat, feel free to ask your questions, give us your views on whatever topics we're talking about, and of course let us know what kit you'd like us to put through its paces on future shows or on the website. We also have Michelle in the chat for us today. She will be sending your questions straight through to the studio and also dropping some really useful links into the chat with some further information as we go as well. So this morning we were mostly talking about music streaming, and if you missed it, don't worry, because you can watch it on Cat Up on our YouTube channel. And again, Michelle will drop that address into the chat for you. And while you're there, hit subscribe and then you won't miss another Sound Advice live show. Hitting subscribe is a good idea anyway, because to keep out the bots and the spammers, if you want to chat in the chat box, you do need to subscribe and wait 5 minutes. It's to make sure that all the people in the chat are real, live, lovely Sound Advice Live viewers. So just bear with us, hit subscribe, and in 5 minutes you'll be able to start chatting in that chat box. So this afternoon we are looking at home cinema and hi-fi, but we're starting out with video streaming. Now let us know in the chat if you prefer Netflix maybe, or Disney Plus, Amazon, or something else, and why. So whether you're a film fan, or you're a box set binger, or a documentary devotee, you're probably streaming it. But subscriptions are getting very pricey now. No matter what you subscribe to, it's always a good habit to reevaluate it every now and then, in case you're paying for something and not really getting full value for your money. So let's have a look at what is on offer out there at the moment. Right now I am joined by Steve Withers in the studio, and Steve's been taking a look at what's available from whom now. So thanks for joining me, Steve. What
Welcome,
are
Angela.
the best options out there?
I'm going to say this isn't everything. This is just the main streamers, because there is a myriad of choice out there. The fragmentation in video distribution is quite shocking, to be honest. I'm old enough to remember when there were only 3 channels on TV and that was it. So there was a lot out there, but I've picked the things that are the primary video distribution services, and I'll run through them one by one, giving you my thoughts, how much they cost and what they offer in terms of choice, and specifically what they offer in terms of AV quality. So kicking off with Now TV, this is Sky's video streaming service. That's a £10 a month. And for £10 a month, you will get you'll get 720p and 2 channel. You can boost that with an extra £5 to get 1080p and 5.1 audio. So that's 15 quid for 1080p and 5.1. That is, I've got to say, not great value. In fact, the fact that the basic service is 10 quid and 720p is quite frankly shocking in the modern age of 4K and HDR and things like Dolby Atmos. So that's a real shame. They do have some quite good shows. I mean, obviously they built a lot of their presence on the back of sport, football specifically. So obviously you can access that, but that would be a different price platform. The prices I've just listed just for watching the Now TV service for, basically streaming shows. So things like House of the Dragon, which is currently obviously being streamed and is very popular. I've got to say, of all the streaming services available, I think Now TV offers the least value and the worst AV. So there you go. Next up, we've got Paramount Plus, which is a new streamer. It's only launched a couple of months ago, back in the summer, back in June, I believe. That's obviously, as the name suggests, that's Paramount streaming service. So there's all the Paramount TV shows, Paramount movies. That's 7 quid a month, which is not too bad price-wise. But currently, it's restricted to 1080p and 5.1. Now, I do know that in the US, they actually offer 4K, HDR10 Plus, and Dolby Atmos. So hopefully that will change in the near future. But at the moment, it is slightly restricted in terms of its video and audio quality. But there's some good stuff on there. There's some great original shows that they've made recently. One I watched called The Offer, which is about the making of the film The Godfather, which was a Paramount movie. But it's a great mini-series and really interesting seeing what they went through to actually get that film made, particularly the involvement of the mafia. That's a new service. We've got Amazon's Prime Video service. I'm pretty sure I'm not the only person watching this who doesn't actually pay for Prime Video. I pay for Prime so I can get stuff delivered the next day. I get a video streaming service as an extra added benefit. 95 quid a year or £9 a month. Now, I've got to say that Amazon's video streaming service is good. I mean, certainly in terms of picture quality, you get 4K, you get HDR10 Plus, or on some shows Dolby Vision. You also get Dolby Atmos on some shows, and they've got a pretty good selection of stuff. But I do find their interface, it's been changed recently, but it isn't the most intuitive interface I've ever seen. They tended to hide a lot of content, but it's got better recently, and obviously they have some very big new flagship shows like Lord of the Rings of Power. So good service overall, great picture quality, and not too expensive. And let's be honest, you're not paying for the streaming service, you're probably paying to get deliveries very quickly. So an added bonus, really. Next up, we've got Disney Plus, which is £80 a month, or sorry, £80 for a year subscription, or £8 a month. And again, Disney Plus is a good service in terms of its picture quality and sound quality. You've got 4K, you've got Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos. You've got a great selection of stuff, obviously Disney, Star Wars, Marvel, and Pixar. And a lot of original shows like The Mandalorian, which is very popular on Disney Plus. And this is a little bit of a, in the US, Disney's video distribution is fragmented. They've got things like Hulu and FX, but here it's all in one service. So there's a thing called Star, which is part of Disney Plus in this country, and that gives you access to all the more adult content, not the kiddie stuff, but the more adult content, all the 20th Century Fox content, 20th Century Fox movies, a lot of the shows that were made for FX or for Hulu in the States. So things like Only Murders in the Building, which is a great show, that's in the Star section. There's a recent show that's just started called Welcome to Wrexham, which is about about Ryan Reynolds buying the Wrexham Football Club, which is a great show as well. So there's some really good stuff on Disney Plus, and a lot of it may be stuff that you hadn't really thought of, so not necessarily Disney things. And then we've got obviously the big boy, Netflix. That's £15 a month for the top, or $15.99 should I say, for the top tier, which means you get 4K, Dolby Vision, Dolby Atmos. There are cheaper alternatives, and Netflix. It's massive amount of choice. Sometimes more quality than quantity, I'd have to say occasionally, but they do have some really great shows. Obviously, Stranger Things is their flagship show, but they have a huge amount of content. They've been investing heavily in a lot of movies recently, so you've had big films like The Grey Man and Red Notice. So Netflix, no question, the biggest streamer on the market, and definitely one of the best in terms of picture quality, sound quality, and choice.
And Steve Murray in the chat is saying that Netflix seems to have another HD service for even more money. Is that the top price tier that you were talking about?
No, $15.99
just asking
would
if
be
it's
the top
worth
price.
it.
Is a top price. Right, you can get I think it's £10 for an HD service and $15.99 for the full 4K service. So yes, depending on what you want. Obviously, I'm assuming if you've got a nice TV, you want to get the best out of it, so you're going to want to pay for the best service. But don't forget, Netflix is $15.99. That's the same price you should be paying for Now TV, but you're getting a lot more content, and you're also getting it in better quality. Finally, there's Apple TV Plus, which is only $4.99 a month. So it's the cheapest of all of these streamers. It does 4K, Dolby Vision, and Dolby Atmos, so the picture quality is excellent. There's very high bandwidth too, and it hasn't got the quantity of Netflix, but it's got quality, because almost every show on Apple TV Plus is fantastic. Ted Lasso is an amazing show. They've got things like For All Mankind, which is an amazing show. So they don't throw everything at the wall the way that Netflix does and see what sticks. They tend to just select quality content. But I watch Apple TV a lot because there's some really, really good shows on it, and it doesn't get talked about as much, which is a shame, because it's probably the best service with the best quality, and both in terms of picture and sound, and also the best quality in terms of the content. So that would be my sort of the secret streamer that everyone forgets about, but actually is probably one of the best.
So best kept secret, Apple
Yes.
TV. And it's true, isn't it? People talk, we were talking about music streaming this morning and saying, oh, you know, there's 90 million tracks available here. And video streaming, you might say, oh, there's this many shows and this many films available. But if most of them aren't your thing, then maybe it is better to have a smaller selection of very high quality, very watchable shows, because how much TV can one person actually manage to watch in a lifetime? So thank you very much for doing that, Steve. We've had a slightly contentious comment from Lewis in saying that now TV is looking a little outdated. Maybe we should call it then TV.
Very
But
good. Very good.
thank you for bringing us up to date on what's out there. And as I say, it's always good with any subscription you have, regardless of what it's for, to periodically have a look at what else is out there. Have a look at what you're currently using of your subscription and make sure that you are getting the best value for money that's keeping you happy. So thank you very much for doing that, Steve. I don't know why I'm thanking Steve, because he's coming straight back again, because next I want to quiz Steve on a whole different topic, because he's been looking at a very special OLED TV. Now, on the Sound Advice website at the moment, there is a bit of a rave review by John Archer on an OLED TV, which I found very interesting. And Michelle will drop the link to that into the chat so you can have a look for it for yourself. But it seems I'm not the only one who found it interesting, because Steve, you've managed to get your hands on this TV as well, haven't you, and put it through its paces. So tell us what it is and what you thought of it.
Well, it's the Löwe Bild Eye, which Bild, by the way, is German for image, which seems rather appropriate. It's their new TV lineup. They've been out of the UK market for a couple of years due to some financial issues which seem to have been resolved. And the new lineup has three screen sizes. There's the Bild Eye 48, which is £2,699. There's the Bild Eye 55, which is £2,999. And the Bild Eye 65, which is £3,699. And if you're wondering why the 48 and 58 aren't very much different in terms of price, that's because the economies of scale are larger for or better for the 55-inch version. So the 48-inch screen size is actually more expensive to make, which is why there actually isn't a big price differential between those two. I saw the 55-inch, which is also what John reviewed in his review, and Löwe are well known for making high-end, high-quality, very good-looking TVs, and this is no exception. It is definitely eye-catching. It's got a lovely fabric on the rear, which looks great. It's got a stand that can be swiveled and it's like a tube, so you can run the cables up inside of it to for cable management, to keep them out of the way, which is really nice. It's got speakers along the bottom. It's definitely a looker. Obviously, it's an OLED TV. So it has a very thin panel. Certainly at the top, obviously it winds out a bit towards the bottom where the speakers are included. And it's got all the benefits you'd expect from an OLED TV. Amazing picture quality, incredibly deep blacks, really rich colors. This is definitely a great TV, not only to look at, but also to look at programs on. It's got the speakers are 20 watts, so it's not the most powerful sound system, but it works pretty well. But what you can do with this TV is you can also you can pair it with the Löwe Klang, which is German for sound. So the Klang Eye, which is a soundbar, and that's designed to be attached to the Bild, and then you can obviously beef up the sound quality and improve it. Although the TV does itself actually decode at Dolby Atmos. So you get Dolby Atmos audio and also Dolby Vision for HDR when you're watching any appropriate programs. It's got. I suspect that their recent return may involve Hisense's to some degree, because it has Hisense's VIDA operating system built into it. So it's got a pretty good smart platform. It includes all the streamers I've just mentioned, apart from Apple TV Plus, unfortunately. But otherwise, it's a pretty extensive selection. It's a very slick interface. It works very well. It's nice and responsive. It's got a nice remote control. It's a slim kind of wand that is very comfortable to hold. It does do the typical modern thing of not actually telling you what the buttons do, but just using little icons. You have to work out what they do. But once you got used to it, it's a really good controller. And overall, it's a very, very good TV. Well made, lovely to look at, great picture quality, good sound quality, and obviously you have the option of improving the sound quality. My one complaint really would be that unusually, given we're in 2022, the HDMI inputs are HDMI 2.0 rather than the new HDMI 2.1 inputs, which basically means if you're a next-gen gamer and you want to play 4K at high frame rates of 120 frames a second, this isn't a TV for you because it doesn't support that. It's only limited to 4K at 60 frames a second. Also, you don't get support for things like VRR, which is variable refresh rate. So bear that in mind if you're a gamer, but otherwise, I mean, obviously these TVs are generally aimed at people who are looking for more of a luxury product rather than a gamer. Certainly it fits that build very nicely.
Now, in the review, John was raving about the blacks and how black the black was, which can be particularly good if you're a real movie buff, can't it? Maybe watching in a darkened room, fade to blacks in the film, and it adds to the drama. And when there's a fade to black and it's grey, it's always a bit of a disappointment in a film.
Yeah, that's the big benefit of OLED, basically. There's absolute blacks. Basically, when the pixel gets turned off, it's black. Whereas with an LCD TV using a backlight, there's usually a little bit of bleed, even if they're using local dimming zones. You don't get that absolute black that you do with an OLED. So, yeah, the contrast performance is absolutely superb on all OLEDs, but specifically on this OLED.
And then in terms of streaming, with reference to, you were talking about the video streaming services earlier on, and you said not Apple TV. Do you mean not pre-installed and you can add that app?
I don't think it's supported by the operating system at the moment, so it's not available and you can't add it. It's just not there right now. I mean, that's one of the problems, probably one of the reasons why Apple TV Plus is less popular currently, is because it's not as widely available. I mean, Netflix is just ubiquitous. It's on everything. Apple TV Plus is still rolling out slowly, just because it's Apple, I guess, and they have more requirements. But at the moment, that's the only major streamer that's not on the VIDA operating system, the Hisense operating system that's built into this TV.
Yeah. Now, of course, if you're a real movie buff, you're probably going to have some kind of multi-speaker sound system. But the Clang bar, as you said, is available, and it actually is made to attach to the TV. And there's also, that's the standard size Clang bar I, but there's a larger one as well, isn't there? If you want beefier sound, maybe if you've got a bigger room, perhaps.
Yeah, or also there are different sizes to match the TV. So there's one that will exactly fit the 55-inch, and a larger one that will exactly fit the 65-inch model. I forgot to mention that the Clang for the 55-inch is £299. So not too pricey actually for the soundbar.
Not too pricey. But that's decent sound, is it, for a very affordable price?
Yes, and again, you get Dolby Atmos from it. So it's definitely, obviously, modern TVs have become thinner and thinner. And, to quote Mr. Scott in Star Trek, you kind of change the laws of physics, Captain. So if you've only got a little tiny speaker, then it's never going to sound great. And so the bigger the speaker you can attach to the TV, the better the sound quality is going to be.
Now, of course, when you're buying a TV, you want to go and look at it. And we've got a question in the chat room saying, is it easy to find in stores in the UK? If you want to look and feel before you purchase, is this Lerva TV widely stocked? Because you said they've been out of the UK TV market for a couple of years now.
Yeah, they have. I mean, you're going to have to go to specialist retailers. There are plenty around still. Obviously, that is one of the big problems with buying any AV equipment these days, is trying to demo it or take a look at it yourself. It's becoming increasingly difficult to find places that do have demo rooms or stock available for you to look at. But independent retailers will certainly have it. I actually went to Moss of Bath, my hometown, to take a look at the Lerva they had there. Yeah, so it's certainly available, but yeah, you might have to make a bit more effort to take a look at it. But I should imagine certainly John Lewis do stock them, so they're pretty. It's plenty of stores do stock Lerva.
So I hope that helps you find one, Murray, and if not, email us, because I'm sure we'll be able to find out where they're being stocked. So thank you very much for that, Steve. But still don't go anywhere, because next I need to chat AV receivers with you. So, over the last few years, sound bars have been getting very popular. As we were chatting about earlier on, to go with a TV, they're very low in cost and convenience, and the quality is getting really very good now. But if you want a genuine home cinema experience, there's still nothing to beat the sound of an AV receiver matched to some really good speakers. So Steve has been looking at a couple of mid-range AV receivers from two of the dominant players in the receiver market, Yamaha and Denon. And he's going to tell us about those today. So Steve, let's start with the Yamaha. How was that?
Yes, the Yamaha RX A6A, which is £2,300. It's the mid-range model, which I think is the sweet spot of the Yamaha range because it's got most of the features you'll find on the A8A flagship, but doesn't have the premium price point. It has 9 channels built in, so you could run a 5.1.4 immersive audio system, just using the AVR without having to add anything to it. But it can actually process up to 11.2 channels. So you could run, if you added 2 more channels of amplification, you could run a 7.2.4 system or a 5.2.6 system, depending on how you wanted to look at it. So yeah, it's 9 channels built in, but 11.2 channels of processing. It does support Dolby Atmos, DTS:X, and the lesser known, less popular Auro 3D format. So you've got a full house of formats there. And I always think with Yamaha, they tend to be quite musical because Yamaha is the only AV manufacturer I know of who actually also makes musical instruments, but they also tend to have quite a lot of power. They tend to be very powerful amplifiers. Big beefy models, and this is no exception. It's got plenty of power, and then when you look at it, it's a pretty big beefy piece of kit. But they have this year simplified the layout, so it's less intimidating from the front. It's got a very clean fascia, just a small display and a big volume control. That's about it at the front. Obviously, when you go around to the back, a bit more complicated, but again, for an AVR, actually pretty simple in terms of its layout. They're trying to strip away the extraneous stuff and make it as simple as possible. Importantly, it has HDMI 2.1 inputs and outputs, which is great news if you're, like I said earlier, a next-gen gamer who wants to game at high frame rate, or if you did have an 8K display and an 8K source, good luck finding one of those. But if it do find one, it can actually pass 8K as well. So it's good in that sense. It's got Yamaha's YPAO room correction system, which is pretty good. It's not the most sophisticated on the market. There are better, but it does give a good result. It is really good at sort of balancing out the bass, and given that you can run 2 subwoofers off of this AVR, you can get a nice balanced bass performance. It's got a host of features built into it. So, you've got built-in Alexa, built-in Google Assistant, you've got Wi-Fi, you've got Bluetooth, you've got AirPlay 2. It has Yamaha's Music Cast, which is a multi-room system, so you can obviously connect it to a multi-room system with other Yamaha products and listen to something on one system and then listen to it elsewhere in the house or throughout the entire house. That's a really good feature. I think Music Cast is probably the best of the multi-room systems that you can get right now. So overall, it's a really, really classy piece of kit. It sounds fantastic. It's powerful. It's got all the features you could possibly want. Yeah, I really like this receiver. And as I say, I think it's a sweet spot because you're getting all these features, but you're not necessarily paying the price premium you would for the A8A.
It sounds like it's absolutely packed with features. Some quality for films that you're watching, some just useful utility functions like an Alexa built in, for example. If somebody is thinking of going for this because they've upgraded their TV, they've been using a soundbar, they're thinking, you know what, we need to get a better home cinema type experience, and this is their first AV receiver purchase. Is it simple or difficult for that setup? Because looking at the back looks a bit scary, right?
There's no question that any AVR is intimidating just by looking at it, particularly if you look at the back. It's relatively straightforward to set up. I will say that Yamaha have got better. In the past, their interface was horribly confusing. The new interface is a lot better. YPAO is pretty easy to use and it comes with a microphone. It's not too difficult to set up. Obviously, you need to go in with your eyes open here. If you're going for a multi-channel AVR system, you're going to have speakers around the room. If you're going for a simple, so there's 9 channels built in. So let's say you're going for 9.1.4. So sorry, 5.1.4. So that means you're going to have 5 speakers at ear level. 3 at the front, 2 at the rear. You're going to have a subwoofer somewhere at the front of the room, and you're going to have 4 speakers overhead, either physically overhead, or you can use upward firing drivers that bounce the sound off the ceiling. So there's a certain commitment here in terms of, taking over a room. If you're doing it in the lounge, be aware there's going to be some cables, there's going to be speakers everywhere, and it's not always that popular when you start trying to do that. But I will say that if you can make a little bit of effort in terms of, putting the speakers in, putting in a sub, setting up correctly, you really will benefit in terms of your audio experience. Nothing elevates watching a movie, like a big blockbuster movie, nothing elevates it more than having a really big blockbuster sound to go with it. And trust me, you won't regret it.
So Yamaha looking quite good for the mid-range, but the other AV receiver you've been looking at is also in that mid-range, which is the Denon AVC X6700H or X6700H. So are you going to do a compare and contrast, or just look at it on its own?
I am. I mean, I've been a big fan of Denon, particularly over the years, because I do think they make really, really good AV receivers that are a great combination of design, features, performance, and price. And this is no exception, because the X6700 is £2,000, so it's a bit cheaper than the Yamaha. It has 11 channels built in, so you could run 7.1.4 or 5.1.6 right out of the box. And it can process up to 13.2 channels. So you've got a lot of processing power in there. Now, I will say that due to that fact, if you look at the rear, it's a lot more complicated than the Yamaha looks. There are a lot more speaker terminals, a lot more inputs. I think Denon could maybe simplify things a bit. But what I will say is that whilst that might look daunting and intimidating, the setup wizard on the Denon AVRs is superb. Really, really good. It takes you through the whole process step by step. It makes it as simple as you could possibly imagine. And you've got Odyssey room correction as well, which again is very easy to use. So actually, whilst it might look intimidating from the rear, setting up this AV receiver and getting the best out of it is actually incredibly easy. And I do think that Denon has the best user interface and setup wizard of any of the manufacturers, apart from Marantz, who are a sister, a stablemate of Denon, so they have basically the same. But it's very well designed. It looks great. It's got a choice of premium silver or black in terms of its finish. It's extremely well made. I like the simplicity of the front with the drop-down flap where all the other controls are hidden behind. It's got a nice big display that's easy to read, which I've got to say, the Yamahas, their new design, the display is quite small and not very easy to read at all. Almost feels like an afterthought, whereas in the Denon, it's classic design. You've got a volume dial on one side, an input dial on the other, and a big display and a drop-down flap in the middle. You can't get more classic than that in terms of AVR design.
But it is an 8K receiver, isn't it? So are we going to see a lot of 8K stuff coming along in the near future, or is this for people who are thinking, I'm only going to do this purchase once in the next few years, I just want to future-proof this purchase?
Yeah, that's the logic behind HDMI 2.1. It's a standard that's future-proofing the products that have got it, so that it supports everything that could come along in the next 10 years. So, 8K at 60 frames, 4K at 120 frames, Dolby Vision, HDR10 Plus, anything you can imagine that's in the pipeline in terms of video or audio, HDMI 2.1 can support it. Now, one thing I will say about Denon, though, is that only one of the HDMI inputs is HDMI 2.1, whereas I think all of them are on the Yamaha. So if you had 2 sources that you needed for either 4K 120 or 8K, then you're out of luck on the Denon, because there's only one input. So that's my one quibble. The other thing I will point out is it's technically not a receiver because it doesn't have a built-in tuner. So technically it's an AV amplifier. So if you're an AM FM nut, then you won't get a tuner on this. There is a tuner on the Yamaha, so that is a receiver. But that's one of the reasons why it's AVC X6700H rather than AVR X6700H, because it's not technically a receiver. But apart from the tuner and only the one HDMI 2.1 input, I would say this is possibly one of the best spec receiver / amplifiers you're gonna find on the market, and it's not, it's competitively priced. And one thing Denon does extremely well is they are great with multi-channel audio. I mean, they have the power and the precision to deliver a really immersive and dynamic cinematic experience in terms of the audio. I would say if you're more musical orientated, you might want to go for the Marantz, which is a stablemate, which is, I'd say, slightly more musical, but Denon I think is better for movies. But Denon does include, along with Marantz, does include their HEOS multi-room system, which is a bit like the music car system on the Yamaha. So if you want to have a system throughout the entire house that you can listen to things in different rooms or throughout the entire house, again, this does form part of that. It also has all the other things you'd expect these days, Amazon, Google Assistant, Bluetooth, AirPlay 2, and obviously Wi-Fi. So very highly spec piece of kit. Sounds fantastic, great with films. I mean, I really do. I've always been a big fan of Denon, and this does not disappoint in terms of performance, value, and features.
Excellent. Now, we do have a question in from Richard in the chat as well. He's asking generally not about either of these particular models, but generally, if you play music through an AVR, does it just use the front left and front right stereo channels, or is there some kind of surround processing going on with that music?
You've got a choice. You can do whatever you like, really. If you want to, you can listen. Say you've got two nice, really good floor standers, listen to it in 2.0, just listen to 2-channel audio and use full channel signal going to each speaker, so bass and everything will go to each speaker because they can deliver low-end good low-end performance. You can do that. If you've got, say, slightly smaller speakers, left and front right, then maybe you could include the sub, so 2.1, basically. Or, if you want to, you can use any number of up-mixing algorithms. Either Dolby do it, DTS does it, Oro also does it. So I forgot to mention that the Denon does include Atmos, DTS:X, and Oro. Plus it has IMAX Enhanced, which is becoming more popular these days. So they can up-mix stuff if you want to use all your speakers in your system. And I've got to say, some of these up-mixes are actually really effective, particularly watching with a movie, if it's a 5.1 mix, using some of the up-mixes so you can use all your speakers in your immersive surround system. It does a really good job of making it sound like it was mixed in Atmos or DTS:X when actually it wasn't. So when it comes to listening to music, you have a wide choice. You can go purist, or you can go bonkers and just have every speaker being used. Entirely up to you.
Thank you very much, Steve. So, Richard, I hope that answered your question. I hope you have fun trying out the different options and deciding which sounds best for you. So I'm going to let Steve go and have a very well-earned cup of tea now after all that chatting on Sound Advice Live. Thank you very much for doing that, Steve. And if you are in the new market for an AVR, and maybe you are on a soundbar right now, and this is your first look at this full home cinema type experience, then Michelle has a link that she can drop into the chat with all the AV receiver reviews that are on the Sound Advice website. So have a good old browse and have a look through and find the right one for you. And remember, there's always experts available to help you make that decision. So hopefully Steve's gone off to have a nice cup of tea now, and we are going to head to our final item today. We're going back to hi-fi for 3 very different amplifiers. So right now I am joined by Ed Selly and Simon Lucas, who love nothing better than a fabulous listening experience. And bearing in mind that the amps we're going to be looking at cost anything from a couple of grand up to 5 figures, we do need to have a look in these reviews at where that money is going and what that means in terms of the experience we're getting back and the sound that we're hearing. So thank you both for coming along. Ed, can I ask you to kick off, please? What have you been putting through its paces? Is it called a Michi X3?
Yes, this is a slightly complicated one because Michi is not a brand in itself. Michi is the premium labelling for Rotel. And it's not the first time that they've used Michi either. There was some Michi components back in the 90s, but it's been rejuvenated, and there are new Michi models which sit on top of the more expensive Rotel devices. The X3 is the smallest and the cheapest of these products, but all things are relative here. This is neither a small nor a cheap amplifier. Essentially, what you get is an enormous Class AB integrated amplifier. It's 350 watts into 4 ohms, I think 200 into 8. So there aren't many speakers that it's not going to drive very satisfactorily indeed. But then that's been combined with a selection of analog inputs. So there's line inputs, there's a balanced input, there's a phono stage, and then supporting that are a selection of digital inputs. So the methodology of this amplifier has changed slightly. It's a significant sum of money. It was £4,500 when I reviewed it, and the nature of things is that it could possibly have gone up since then. But you can attach as many pieces of source equipment as you realistically like to it, but it doesn't need premium source equipment. You can make use of relatively simple sort of streaming head units and so on and so forth to complete the system, or simply just attach a laptop over USB if you really want to go route one on this. And then Rotel has stepped away from how they normally make products, which is to put every button you can think of and then a few more physically onto the front panel of the product. Michi steps away from that. It has a gloss black front panel, which is the hardest thing in the world to photograph, with a very large and clear display. It's a menu-driven interface. It's clean, it's modern. I say it's clean unless you've got a child, in which case it's covered in fingerprints, but it's otherwise normally clean, it's modern. It's a joy to use, and it is beautifully made, and it also comes with one of the nicest remote controls you can buy at any price, which from Rotel is unheard of, because otherwise Rotel haven't changed the remotes they've been supplying since 1994. So this was a genuine joy to interface with. It's a lovely piece of kit, and it sounds fantastic. If you like what Rotel does, a big, confident sound, plenty of low-end extension, but it's not artificial at any stage. It just builds on that with bells on, basically. You keen-eyed readers of the site will notice that the sound advice review was done by my colleague Andrew Everard. I have reviewed the Michi in another capacity. He quite likes the phono stage. The means by which you directly attach a turntable. I'm not so convinced at the asking price that it's a great phono stage, but honestly that's about the limit of my criticisms of the product. It's extremely well made, it's a joy to live with, and it sounds fabulous. And even though it's quite a lot of money, you don't necessarily need to be spending out a significant proportion again on source equipment for it. So the budget that you might apply to this system, it's not going to be, it could well end up being almost 50% of your electronics costs, and still end up with a very balanced and logical system that comes out the other end of it.
And it's making me chuckle that one of the things you're delighted with is the fact that they've redesigned the remote control, and you're overjoyed about
trust
that.
me, it's a big thing. The ones that I like Rotel very much as a company. I particularly like the fact that they are utterly unconcerned what any other manufacturer is up to. They do what they feel is important. But there are certain aspects of it which are of some of their things which are borderline nostalgic. There's nothing nostalgic about the Michi. It feels absolutely of the moment. It's a really, really impressive product.
So as you like that Michi so much, I'm going to come straight back to you, Ed, and say, so if you like that so much, you have also reviewed the Macintosh 8950. So I'm interested to hear what you're going to say about that now. A bit of a price difference, I would say.
Yeah, just a little bit. The Macintosh is yours for £12,450, which isn't much if you say it quickly.
Wow.
I mean, let's be honest, this is a tremendous amount of money. And the other thing is, there are photos of the Macintosh available. If you put the front panel up, it's one of those things which fundamentally divides opinion. You'll either be entirely on board with how the Macintosh looks, or you wouldn't want it anywhere near anywhere you lived. The thing is that people say it's a retro look. It's not. Macintosh products have always looked like this. They haven't changed. It's just everyone else has changed around them. The other thing I would say is that it is bizarrely, you can see lots of controls and dials and the display seems incongruous. I will say, and I do mean this, it's one of the easiest products to use because you can see at a glance what it's doing at any given time. So there is a method to how it looks, but if you like, that's secondary to why it's expensive. In the review, I have covered the Macintosh uses a piece of equipment called an autoformer. There is neither the time nor the interest to go into exactly what that is. But the long and the short of it is you can connect anything short of 2 lengths of wet rope to this amplifier and it will drive them, and it will drive them entirely consistently. This means that you can choose your speakers with absolute impunity. And then once you've chosen your speakers with absolute impunity, you can connect I think 16 different things to the Macintosh. There are analog inputs, there are balanced analog inputs, there are digital inputs, there is an HDMI ARC connection for attaching your television. You can take USB from a computer or a streaming transport. There's a dedicated connection for attaching a Macintosh SACD transport. You think of it, they've attached it to the back of it. There are 2 phono stages. A separate moving magnet and a moving coil phono stage. They can both be selected independently of one another. This amplifier has every single connection you can possibly imagine. And then, because of those transformers and because of how they've set it up, everything that goes into the Macintosh ends up sounding pretty much exactly the same. Now, that's both good and bad, because if you are looking for something which absolutely preserves every last nuance of how your source equipment sounds, this is not the amplifier for you. If, however, you simply like the sound of the Macintosh and you wish to connect whatever you want to connect to it and have it all come out in a really consistent and utterly sort of benign way, this amplifier is extremely capable. There is a fly in the ointment. If you also look on the Sound Advice website, you'll see that I've reviewed another Macintosh amplifier because I'm a sucker for punishment. That's the 7200, and it's yours for just £10,000. The only difference really between these 2 amplifiers is that the bigger one, the 8950, has HDMI ARC and a better digital board, and it also has tone control, a 5-band tone control, which allows you to alter the behavior of a speaker in room more effectively. And the 7200 has neither of those things. If you don't need either of those things, the 7200 uses exactly the same amplifier. It sounds pretty much exactly the same. So if you're happy with how your speakers are performing in room and you're not looking to attach to television, or you have decent digital sources elsewhere, that could arguably be I was about to say the better value. I mean, value is subjective at £10,000, but it would nevertheless be a way of saving £2,500, and you'd still end up with a tremendously impressive amplifier. But like the Rotel, but bigger and on steroids, the Macintosh is so much of a system, if you need it to be, that the way you're budgeting for it, it still doesn't require much in the way of additional electronics expenditure unless you specifically want to spend out on those electronics. It's not a requirement otherwise. So it's a lot of money, but it's not the same as it perhaps £12,500 would have been even 10 years ago, where you'd still be looking at source equipment on top of that, because it's the way these amplifiers have been built has changed.
Ed, thank you very much. Now, of course, in the interest of health and safety, I do have to point out that we at Sound Advice don't recommend you attach 2 pieces of wet rope to any of your electronic devices
No, that's fair.
in the house. However, we got the gist of what you were trying to say, and I am glad that you are utterly delighted with all the Macintoshes that you have tried out. But in the interest of balance, and just to show that size perhaps isn't everything, Simon, I'm going to come to the amp that you've been looking at now, because I think that's the smallest of the bunch we've been talking about, isn't it? But it has a very grand heritage, does it not, Simon?
No, that's right. This is the Cyrus I9 Xr that we're discussing. After Ed's flights of fancy, we're going to bring this back vaguely into the real world and talk about an amplifier that's yours for £3,295. Cyrus was creating lifestyle equipment before lifestyle equipment was even a thing. Basically, they have a sort of a half-size casework. It's half the width of the majority of separates, and they have been putting components of all types into casework this small for the thick end of 40 years now. And the i9 XR is their most recent integrated amplifier. And I have to say, I have some issues with this amplifier, but none of them concerned the way it sounds. I love the Cyrus sound. I've always enjoyed it, and this is just like an Uber Cyrus. Really, it's very fast, it's very lean, it's very detailed, it's very maneuverable, and it's absolutely faithful to the source equipment that you put in. A lot of people like bass, yeah, and I think at first acquaintance, a Cyrus amplifier can sound like it's short of bass, but it's not. There is as much body and as much substance there as there is in the music that it's playing, but it's just so rapid and so well controlled that it can, on first acquaintance, sound insubstantial. But it isn't. It is what Cyrus deals in is realism, and that's why I like the sound of this amplifier so much. It's exceptional, I think, for the money.
So you're saying it's not like that overblown kind of bass, maybe a more precise representation of what was on the original recording. It's
realistic is what it is. It doesn't, I've heard other amplifiers at this sort of money, and they put you in mind of a Vauxhall Nova driving past with an excitable young man at the wheel. But no, this is a realistic sound. This is fidelity. And as a consequence, it makes everything sound the way it ought. And even though this is a tiny device, relatively speaking, certainly compared to the Macintosh stuff that Ed's been enjoying, it still has support for 9 devices, a record player, 4 analog sources, 4 digital sources, 5 actually if you count the USB. And this is where this is where I just start to struggle a little bit with this product, because you can see on the back of there, this is a half-width product. There is binding for 2 pairs of speakers. There is a total of 9 inputs, digital and analog. There's an MC bus, so you can join other Cyrus equipment to it and use a common remote control. There's pre-outs for a recording device. There's where you keep your mains power, of course. And so with incredible and almost noble disregard for logic, Cyrus has decided that they ought to put the headphone socket on the back as well. If you've connected 9 sources to this, and maybe a Cyrus power supply, and maybe you've connected a recording device to it as well, then it's going to be pretty busy around the back of there. So having to search around there to make a connection for your headphones as well it's not the most elegant solution I've ever encountered.
Yeah, so that means either a dedicated pair of headphones that you never unplug and take anywhere else, or some kind of plug-in socket that you bring around to the front of the device.
Or a light for your strap line.
Well, if you want to go delving round at the back of the thing in nests of cables, that's absolutely your choice, Simon. Quite a business-looking...
It's my job, is what it is.
A business-like looking beast, isn't it? When you compare it to the sort of romanticism of the Macintosh, perhaps, it's a very plain, business-like looking component. I read it's got 7 digital filters.
There are 7 digital filters, yes. Well, I mean, if you listen to a lot of different types of genre of music and you listen to them from a lot of different digital sources, these are worth investigating, and it kind of makes the owner feel like they're having some say in the eventual sound, I think. But ultimately, this is the Cyrus sound we're paying for, and if I haven't rhapsodized about that enough, then the Cyrus sound is worth paying for. And you don't want the end user sticking their oar in really too much, I don't think. I think Cyrus knows best here, ultimately. I think it's a little gesture towards, if your digital sources are numerous, then perhaps you can affect the sound a little bit from source to source in the sound that you get. But they don't make a huge difference, no.
Simon, thank you very much. And in the chat, we have a comment from Murray, who says he might be showing his age, but he was the proud owner of a Generation 1 Cyrus integrated amp. So maybe it's time he went back to look at that one. I don't know where you put it, Murray. Have you put it in the attic? Happy hunting for that one anyway. But the modern Cyrus is certainly, as I say, a very small, very compact thing. But you seem very, very happy with that sound, Simon. So thank you very much.
It's
for reviewing
all day, every day. It's extraordinary sound.
Excellent. Simon, Ed, thank you very much for doing those reviews of all the amp in record time. That is all we've got time for today. So thank you for all your input. And I hope all of that has whet your appetite to find out more. Michelle will put the website link in the chat so you can go and have a good old browse at other amps that have been reviewed on the website as well. And you'll be able to find the written reviews of pretty much every piece of kit we've looked at today if you have a look on the website. Plus, of course, you can watch any bits of today's show or earlier today's show on YouTube and have a catch up on there. Hit subscribe and then you won't miss any future ones either. Before you go though, let us know in the chat what you enjoyed about today's shows and what you'd like to see us review next time. So until next time, see you then.